time again of the year where we expect the Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich to tell us how the budget has been planned in the next 1 year. And we just want to have a discussion in terms of the expectation that some of the Kenyans have toward this day. And I'm joined by Steve Okoth, who's the tax director at BDO East Africa, and Chachi Logutu from Jones Research, Capital Senior Research Analyst. And we just want to understand what exactly should Kenyans expect towards this budget day as it nears, and it's happening on Thursday this week, where the CS Rotich will present it before Parliament, and of course everyone in Kenya will be looking at this. First of all, Steve, I'd like you to tell us what are some of the expectations towards this day as it nears.
Okay, already the government has expressed an interest in certain policy matters.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is institutional building, in terms of institutions that administer justice and are investigative. For example, the office of the DCI, the Kenya Police as a whole, the various departments in the Kenya Police. There is also an interest to strengthen the judiciary, particularly to build capacity in the criminal prosecutorial aspect of that particular department. So this, we expect to see more monies being allocated to this particular department than before.
Mm-hmm.
Another area which has been a focus is infrastructure. There are already infrastructure plans that have been rolled out, or some are about to be rolled out. The highway, we are expanding the highway from Mombasa to Nairobi.
Yeah.
We are also investing more in the road infrastructure. So I expect to see more allocations in that regard, in the infrastructure or sectors. I hope to see more commitment in education, in healthcare, and in agriculture, because these are very critical to the economy. I hope to see that there is more focus in those particular sectors, because they are the ones which can really put the bread on the table for most Kenyans.
All right, so you're actually predicting that education, agriculture, infrastructure are some of the key areas in which the government should consider in terms of budget. Chacha, this one I'd like to ask you, what about the tax revenue collection? Like we've in the past years we've noticed CS has had trouble, Rotich has had trouble with the KRA department, being that they're not able to reach the target in terms of revenue collection in the country, and this is still a discussion that is going on. And recently we observed that he's likely not to reach the target towards this day. So what would you say about in terms of revenue collection that has been a problem in the past few years?
Yeah, thank you, Julie, for that question. Our analysis from the fiscal year 2010-2011 all through to fiscal year 2017-2018 showed that on average that the ordinary revenue collection missed its target by 4.3%. And in particular for the last fiscal year, that's between 2017-2018, those are 8.9% miss, which was equivalent to around 124 billion in terms of deficit in revenue collection. And it has also spilled even in the current financial year, whereby data as at April showed that we are sitting at around 1.21 trillion in terms of the ordinary revenue, which is a miss of, if you look at it against the prorated target of 1.39 trillion. So that definitely was a miss. So the focus will be, how will Treasury now come up with new revenue enhancement measures in the next fiscal year? And if you look at the overall budget in terms of the ordinary revenue collection, there's an increase of around 214 billion from 1.65 trillion to 1.88 trillion in the next financial year. Already we are sitting at a miss of close to 185 billion, but yet there's an increase of 214 billion. So how realistic is our revenue collection target? So that is something that will be quite keen to look at on Thursday's presentation.
Okay, so what are some of the measures that Steve would propose the Treasury should concentrate on he's talked about the fact that we are not, it's like we're not being realistic in terms of revenue collection. And you've seen one of the issues about taxes has had a lot of Kenyans, they do not want the tax to be raised at all. So what would you have to say about this?
Okay, one, first of all, revenue collection targets are already not realistic.
Yeah.
We have to face that fact that they are not realistic, because the economy has not been performing very well, particularly in the last few years. We don't expect miracles in the next 12 months. We don't expect miracles at all. So we need to be modest about revenue collection targets. But there are certain areas that can be focused on by Treasury to actually, plug this deficit. One of them is institution building and institution strengthening, particularly or strengthening the infrastructure and the machinery of Kenya Revenue Authority. That is a key area to strengthen the infrastructure of Kenya Revenue Authority in terms of manpower, in terms of tools, in terms of resources, and just to ensure that that engine is running smoothly. That is a first step, because at least that you can do something about. The other issue that can be worked on is to focus on other areas of the economy that have not contributed adequately to the revenue collection. The informal sector has largely been out of the picture, but now we have resources. The Kenya Revenue Authority can partner with county governments to ensure that that sector is also making its contribution to revenue collection of the country. There are opportunities in terms of plugging revenue leakage, tax leakage. These ones I think are now known by everyone. Or if this can be plugged in terms of the smuggling and underpayment of taxes at the point of importation, or non-filing by many business persons, and generally playing in the informal and in the dark. That is a big aspect of the economy. If they were to be brought in, then we will see some sort of contribution. Otherwise, on a macro level, I don't expect to see exponential organic growth in the economy, which then will translate into greater revenue generation. We can work on building capacity of the government to collect tax. We can work on the enrolling more business persons and more Kenyans to contribute to the revenue generation. But I don't see anything organic in the economy contributing.
Okay, if we speak about the informal sector and Treasury going out for people who don't really contribute to the revenue, but are we considering the fact that the rate of unemployment is currently so high in the country? So if CS is supposed to go and the Treasury is supposed to go and look for more people, probably the informal sector that you've mentioned, and the informal sector does not really generate, majority of them do not generate much income. Don't you think this will probably just hurt Kenyans even more, who are not able to sustain themselves better?
It calls for thank you for that, but it calls for facing reality, and it also calls for being innovative. I would not like to call it innovative. I think just being realistic. We need to design our tax system and our tax laws such that it can be able to enlist some of these people. It is not small monies, and where the informal sector players play is actually quite easy to identify. For example, when you go to the markets, you go to Gikomba, you go to Isili, you go to all markets around the country. We already have, or albeit through the county governments, we already have a network of identifying everyone who is trading in the market centers, in the town, in the markets. We need to ensure that if someone has been licensed and is operating or is known to be operating, because no one is not known, then they need to enlist in the tax bracket. these are not people you may subject to the normal tax compliance regulations.
Yeah.
You have to design a system. You have to design some space to be able to capture their contribution. So the dilemma that has been there in the past several years in regard to this debate is, how do you create a separate system for a different category of Kenyans? How do you create different laws for different Kenyans in terms of payment of tax? But I think that dilemma needs not to go on for long, because other countries are actually having some sort of dual system. I'm saying we structure our tax system to meet to capture the manner in which various people in our society, in our economy, are doing business. If that is done, then we stand to see additional revenue. This is not small. If you look at the turnover that is being churned in some of the markets, for example, Gikomba or Isili, it is quite significant.
Yeah.
It is quite a significant portion. So this needs to be brought in, and it might not lead to hurting generally of many people, because these are already traders who are making profit. They are doing business. They are making good profit. It's only that they are not operating within the system.
Okay, Churchill, how do you think Kenyans will react should the government adopt the dual system, if at all they intend to do that? How do you think Kenyans are going to take this, where half of the country, like we have a dual system in terms of tax payment or tax revenue collection? Do you think Kenyans are ready for that, or the government is ready to adopt that?
Yeah, that's also a pertinent issue in the country. If just as a rejoinder to what Steve has said, past years we had what was called the turnover tax, whereby if your business is generating anything below 5 million, it's subjected to 3%. But because of the capacity constraints by KRA to be able to go to these informal sector businesses, they're not able to come. There was not much fruits that came out from that kind of a system. Then it proposed, beginning early this year, 1st of January to be specific, they introduced what is called the presumptive tax to the informal businesses. Remember that informal businesses in the Kenyan economy accounts to around 83% of formal employment. So ideally, the thing behind it was that for every single business permit that each of these businesses are paying, they have to load a 15%, which is the presumptive tax. I haven't seen numbers yet for the first 5 months, but I think they were looking at at some point they were looking at collecting 625 million. I think that's just some conservative estimates just from this tax element. But concerns is that already single business permit is being charged by the county governments, yet presumptive tax has to be accrued to the national government. So how can an informal business now come and split in terms of single business permit to county government and then the 15% to national government? Or how can county governments now collect it and reimburse the national government? So that is something that we are yet to see what will come out of it. Having said that, in terms of county governments, you realize that they actually are distributed 85% of their revenues from the national government. So it will be quite a Herculean task, if I may put it that way, for county governments now to be able now to reimburse another 15% out of a revenue stream that they're getting. So it's something that we haven't seen much statistics in the last 5 months, which will now be able to affirm how successful it has been in terms of the charging informal businesses.
All right, another key thing that has been in discussion, Steve, is about the Youth Development Fund. They do not really get access to the money allocated to them. What would be the right channels to probably ensure that the government, the youth are able to access this money that is allocated to them each and every year? Because that has been a discussion for quite some time, and it is time something needs to be done.
Okay, the youth, according to many Kenyans, the Youth Development Fund has been a disappointment as a program. It has not achieved policy objectives. It has not. There aren't many people attributing their success or progress to that fund, contrary to the very ambitious ideals that were there when this was conceived. And you have to look at the way the fund is structured. It is not likely to be in tune with the modern day reality. For you to access funds, you have to form groups. You have to guarantee for everyone, so that you can access facility. The amounts of money being disbursed may not be significant to start worthwhile investments. The way it's structured is not is not very attractive. If there is a focus on this, then it needs to be structured to be a facility to support young entrepreneurs, and to support young entrepreneurs in a more serious fashion, because the young entrepreneurs will create employment. Not everybody can be an entrepreneur, not everybody can be a business person. So basically we need to focus on the young men who are innovative and ambitious, and all they need is government support in order to build businesses, pull ideas through, and that should be the focus. Not everybody, because the everybody method, you have to manage risk, you have to mitigate risk, and one of the ways of mitigating risks of lending is to ensure that the people being lent is a group, at least some sort of a group, so that one person does not run away. But if it is structured properly, then proper ideas, good ideas can be identified from serious young men and women, and those can be supported to fruition, to success. I think that is the only way in which it can work. As it is structured now, it may just be a political pet project.
Okay. Churchill, we all are conversant with the fact that the debt, the rate at which the debt rate is ballooning as days go by, and this also affects the budget. What do you have to say about this, like in the coming years? Where would Kenya be if we continue borrowing? Already we were told a few days ago that we are soon getting to be at the debt trap in the country.
Yeah, thank you. As at March 2019, we were sitting at around 5.4 trillion in terms of the overall public debt in the country. And looking at this is even excluding the recent 210 billion that we picked from the Eurobond 3 issuance. So we are looking at, by the end of this fiscal year, which is ending in a few weeks' time, we'll be at around 5.7, 5.6 trillion in terms of the overall public debt. Of course, that's a key concern, bearing in mind that if you look at public debt in terms of the overall GDP, we were at 57% and we are likely to be at 60% by the end of June 2019. So that is quite a concern. It's raising some red flags. Having said that, we normally also look at some of the other measures in terms of how sustainable the debt we have in our country. So one of the other measures we look at is in terms of the public debt, net public debt that we are incurring each financial year as a percentage of the ordinary revenue. As at last year, we had public debt, as at this current financial year, which is ending in June 30th, we had public debt at around 831 billion shillings. And in terms of the ordinary revenue of 1.6 trillion, that was around 50%. So for every shilling that you collect in revenues, 50% of it is going to repay the debt in terms of interest payment and also the debt redemptions, both on the internal front and also the external front. That is a concern, bearing also in mind that revenue has not been performing. So it's squeezing out other areas whereby the revenue should be able to be allocated towards, because first of all, public debt is a fast charge item, meaning that if you are just able to collect 1 trillion shillings and you have public debt of 800 billion, we have to clear out that 800 billion and we just remain with 200 billion, just to bring how enormous it is as a fast charge item. Luckily for the next financial year, which we are starting in July 1st, that public debt item is dropping from that 832 billion to 697 billion. And as a percentage of the ordinary revenue that is being anticipated in the year it's around 37% in terms of the overall revenues that is being anticipated to be collected. So already there's concern that if you're not able to meet the revenue collection, it will squeeze out other areas which is supposed to be funded. Of course, the trajectory that Treasury is looking at is a downward trend in fiscal debt. Last year we were sitting at around 6% of percentage of the total GDP in terms of which is being financed, 6%, but in the next financial year we're looking at 5.6%. So there's a fiscal consolidation, a downtrend from 6% to 5.6%. The overall target is we are supposed to be at 3% by the 2020-2021 financial year, thereabout, which is in line with the other neighboring countries in the East African community. So it's one of those convergence criteria. But nonetheless, is that percentage of GDP can be, if you have an ambitious GDP target and we're not able to meet that target, it also balloons that fiscal deficit in terms of the percentages. So, but all in all, we're saying that for the next financial year, there's a steep decline in terms of the fiscal deficit to 5.6%, which in aggregate terms is around 608 billion shillings that is supposed to be raised from both internal front and external fronts. Speaking of internal fronts, this is where the T-bonds, the T-bills comes in, which are to be raised locally. And external fronts, that's where we have the bit of commercial financing, which has a significant aspect of that external debt. Eurobonds, the syndicated bonds come in, and more so we see that the multilateral debt from the World Bank has been really coming down, and now we are going to the more expensive commercial financing, which is also another concern in any fiscal year, that more of the debt is going towards expensive borrowing as opposed to what is called concessional borrowing that used to get from the World Bank and the IMF. So that is a major concern even as we head to the next financial year.
All right. As we wind up, Steve, there's one of the discussion that has erupted in the country since over the weekend that Chinese are in Gikomba. This looks as a surprise, but didn't we expect this to happen soon?
Oh, it should not happen. We should not have foreigners coming to do small-time business in the country, doing SME type of business. If we are to have a proper immigration policy, if we are to have foreigners in the country, there should be people who are coming in to bring skills, to bring ideas, and most importantly, to bring capital. I don't think trading in Gikomba is something that qualifies under those criteria, and this is only showing the institutional weakness that we have, in immigration, in licensing. It is quite weak. Our immigration system is quite weak to have not netted that kind of a problem.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. This is what we had for you in terms of pre-budget, and we're going to come back on Friday to talk about how the budget is going to be once Treasury submits it in front of Parliament and the whole of Kenya. Thank you.